Hi, everyone. We're back with another trade news roundup from the Simply Trade podcast. Thank you for coming on today and joining us as we're discussing some important articles from what has been happening. I guess it would be last week. We're still in this week, but as we're recording, but for you, whatever happened would be in the last week. I am here in the studio with Lalo and Andy. Hi, everyone.
Good morning.
Hello.
Anyways, we're going to go straight into the articles now. I wouldn't say it's a lighter topic, but it's a different topic that doesn't gross me out as much. So the first one we have, the House Foreign Affairs Committee has voted to advance a bill making it easier for the Biden administration to restrict exports of AI systems amid worries of China's military utilization. So what I'm getting from this bill would be that people in America are not allowed, or companies are not allowed to work with Chinese companies to work on AI modifications or advancements, correct? Just because the United States could be helping China to create something, that they can obviously use against the U.S., which has been a topic that we've been talking about for a while now. I can't even recall when we started on this. So what are you guys saying on this? And where is this bill going? And, let's just touch on this subject.
Well, I'll say, let me just jump in real quick. I think this is something that, believe it or not, Congress, this is a bipartisan effort. I think this is actually a good bill. I'm not the expert on the actual technology they're talking about, but they're one of the key elements in this. If you're an IT firm, IT development, supporting IT development, or have any of those projects underway that's going to utilize AI technology, you better be looking at the implications here, because the Department of Commerce, apparently if this bill is passed and becomes law, will have authority on stopping any of your AI developments if it feels like that could be a threat to national security. So the point I'm trying to get at is your cause and effect. Whatever AI, as simplistic as it may seem to what you're utilizing, you need to step back or get some neutral parties involved and say, could this be utilized in some type of fashion that could be some nefarious folks utilize it against the U.S.? So just have that checked out, kind of a neutral scenario there. Other than that, I think this is something that potentially is good. I think it's a little bit late. But on the same token, as nice as the bill is, I also believe that this is something that how are you going to really police it? I think it's going to be a difficult item to enforce. But the point is that any artificial intelligence coding software and incorporation into or integration into systems has the potential of falling under this that could be stopped or regulated from the government. I think it's a good thing. This is a U.S. law. I don't know about Canada and some other allies if they're doing the same thing. And I think Ireland has a lot of IT development as well. But the point being is this is something to look at. I think it sounds good for it's a bipartisan effort, and actually it's gaining a lot of good support.
Exactly. Nothing more to add other than, you covered it completely, Andy. Other than keep an eye on it, because as Andy said, it hasn't passed. It hasn't become a bill yet. It only went through the initial screening phase, and it still needs to go through the Senate and Congress before President Biden signs it into law. However, it was very favorable. When they took a vote, it was like 43-3 or something like that. So it was, and it's bipartisan, and all the signs are pointing towards this is going to happen. So just mostly keep an eye on it. So that's about it.
Yeah, I think we even talked about the same thing like a few weeks back. So, it did come now back into the news channel. So I'm wondering where this is going and how fast this will become reality, I guess. All right, going on to the next one, which is a big problem right now in the trade industry, which are basically disruptions in the supply chains. So importers are adapting their stock strategies and shipping patterns in response to disruptions and tariff uncertainties, with some companies resorting to double booking to secure container space. So that's just one of the issues that's happening. But I believe what they say is they are facing prices reaching up to $10,000 for an urgent full-size container in the upcoming month, which I'm not sure what kind of percentage that was of an increase, but it was a huge increase. I think the current charge is around 5,000. And yeah, so 10,000 is that's a huge change, and it's detrimental for some of the businesses, I would think. So what is your guys' take on this, and how do you think this can be resolved, or not resolved fully, but just handled? Because I know these disruptions are all coming from the Red Seas, these pirates or whatever, and then also tariffs, right? And all these changes now that the importers are adapting to. So what is something what's your take on it?
Well, we've talked about several things. The disruptions of supply chain around the world due to the geopolitical situations, due to turmoil, if you will, logistics turmoil, such as the geopolitical would be, for example, the Houthis in Yemen that are launching missiles and attacks against container ships in the Red Sea. Well, that's disrupted a whole lot of things, so that your cycle times have increased dramatically because these container ships are avoiding the Red Sea, and they're having to go around the Cape of Africa and come back up and all that. Well, what's happening now is there is some certain parts of the world, there's port congestion. There are container shortages because these vessels and containers and resources are out of position. So trying to get all that worked out, hence the supply and demand comes back around. So all said and done, these are just things that have been going on, and I guess the overall is just something you have to work on. When we were looking at the pandemic era, you had astronomical shipping rates because volumes had dropped off. Capacity had dropped off. And then it just made it, ridiculous to try and get your goods in. Well, then on the flip side of that, now capacity's grown, things have stabilized. Now here we go again. And then we're getting back into another scenario where you're going to have port congestion in different parts of the world. To be quite frank, the Panama Canal has still not received sufficient rainfall so that the frequency of ships moving through the Panama Canal can go back to normal frequencies. So that is another, hit there. You've got, the different storms that have come through with the hurricane seasons and all of that all that comes into play. So if you're in transportation planning, logistics and all that, these are things that you just have to deal with because of these issues. But second, is that just understand you may have your budgets, but now all of a sudden the prices are going back up. So looking at diversifying your supply chain, and I say that from a standpoint of diversifying your suppliers, your sources, and looking to see so that if there is a geopolitical situation that comes up in one part of the world, you're not held hostage to one source for your goods, and that you have diversified and now you can adjust accordingly. That's probably, we've been saying that for the last 2 years. Lila, you've made some great points on some of that in some comments over the years here. But the point being is, folks, you got to diversify. if you're going to be able to handle these things, or otherwise you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And if there's a problem with that and that basket drops, your eggs are going to break and you're up a creek.
I guess I just need to clarify this in my to the audience. I use that word "it's funny" a lot. I don't mean funny like haha funny. I mean funny like ironic funny. You know, that it's or isn't it strange how, you know, kind of funny. Okay, so it's not. I don't mean to make a joke out of this or anything, but it is. It is common that we have been hearing at all the conferences again, and I'm going back, and only because it's not just us talking about it and making something out of nothing, but pretty much at all the conferences, they are almost all talking about things like this, like supply chain resiliency, which is more or less what we're talking about here. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because we will have pretty soon, I think we're scheduled for around sometime in July to have some government official from Department of Homeland Security, from the Department of Supply Chain Resiliency, not department, the center, I guess. What is it called? Supply Chain Resiliency Center. So it is a center. Come on our show, and we're going to discuss this extensively on how the U.S. government is also getting involved in trying to help with this. So that's really my only other thing I can add to this. So,
okay, going to the last article, which kind of goes hand in hand with what we just talked about. This forum focused on addressing the escalating disruptions in global supply chains and promoting resilience in the face of world trade disruptions. So two of the things they really talked about was resilience and sustainability, which are truly important. And I do remember that last year on December, when we talked about what is going to be upcoming in the following year, it was resilience. So something they've really focused on is resilience. So they talked on efforts to decarbonize global shipping and promote investments and digital solutions that will be crucial for enhancing supply chain resilience. The forum also emphasized the importance of inclusive, sustainable, and resilient, again, production and distribution networks, which I believe is kind of what you were saying with diversifying, I believe. But we can talk on that. And then collaboration, green technologies, and strategic investments in transport infrastructure were identified as a vital elements in driving sustainable and resilient supply chain practices. So they were kind of uplighting the whole topic of trade, which is not really that light because there's a lot of things happening that, you know, are very dark and cost a lot of money. And so they kind of stayed on the lighter side, expressing these kind of topics. And yeah, you guys can put in your opinions or kind of what is your take on this, or how do you think we can address the disruptions in a better way than what they have addressed them as?
No, there's a lot to talk about here. I know. I'm gonna this article, or the link to the article. Hopefully, you guys will get to it, because there is a lot to uncover, and it just. In summary, they talk about four things, like what are the problems right now, which tend to be, you know, again, supply chain resiliency, exactly, you know, like because of COVID and because of the drought and geopolitical. So supply chain resiliency, they're talking about cleaner ships, you know, so green trade. They're talking about helping small islands. I think Andy talked about it, and he'll have the terminology SIDS or something like that. Only because they need help, because they don't have access to, of course, resources, or as many resources as we do, and using better technology. I thought it was funny that they talked about blockchain, because that's kind of like something that's really like had its heyday a while back, and it didn't go anywhere. But of course, that could be used. The concept of it is really good. It's very interesting how you can't change records, etc. I mean, but I think it needs work. But they are talking about blockchain. So those are the four things. in summary, those are the four things they talked about. But in detail, there's a lot more to dig into. And I guess I can just let Andy and Anik debate that back and forth.
So this article, again, UN Global Supply Chain Forum, it's a forum now of folks from all over the world, calls for resilience amid world trade disruptions. Okay, so resilience means sustaining your supply chain and being able to keep things flowing. Or when there is a disruption, having the flexibility to recover or adjust or adapt. So, as we're getting into this, global disruptions and supply chain vulnerability, and they talk about it. Well, there are disruptions right now. The problem I see, just like I've seen with government committees and things of this nature, these are UN representatives. They get together and they're busy talking. They're busy meeting, and not one cotton picking thing has come out of it. It is a bunch of hogwash as far as I'm seeing. Hey, we've got some disruptions in the supply chain. There's some congestion in the ports. So we're talking about it. We see it. Okay, what are you going to do about it? And there's where we're at, is that if the UN really wanted to do something, they're saying the turmoil in the Middle East with the Yemen situation, the Houthis, and the UN could step in from several countries and put pressure not only on the Houthis but on Iran, who's funding that, and stop this mess. But do they? Do they even talk about it? Oh no. So here's a bunch of people getting together to talk about it. And what's one of the main things about supply chain disruption? Oh, the greenhouse effect. What? Greenhouse effect is not causing port congestion. It's cycle times, it's processing, it's hours of operation. It's, again, how many ships and, what you can handle and all those kinds of things. And the bureaucracy of clearing that stuff and getting it processed effectively in the different ports. So as I look at this, there's some good things that they are touching on, but they go into much more detail on decarbonizing the global shipping. They're focused on the green effort. Okay, I'm all for trying to do that, but not at the sacrifice of making things work. So they're so busy going, what kind of fuel are you using? We got to go low carbon. Oh, by the way, we've gone from 10 ships in the harbor. Now we've got 50 out there trying to get in. But hey, you got to make sure that you're running, other types of fuels. So what I see is a bunch of things that are going around and in this article, and it's not getting any results. So it's a good way to come back around and say, we're busy, we're talking, see, we're representing you. We want to raise these issues up. And at the end of the day, for the average citizen, for you and me, it will be decades before anything meaningful will come out of these types of talks. They're talking, as another example, SIDS. SIDS stands for strategic. Let me look here again. I got to look at this.
Yeah. Okay. So while you were doing that, and I had said that, I had looked at it. It's a small island developing states.
Yes. So like Barbados and like different, so small islands developing. So obviously, I think it's phenomenal that we want to see and help some of these small countries develop their, boost their economies. And with that, all that's fine, well, and good. And what are they putting as far as one of the top, prioritizing as far as one of the top things to do? Oh, as you develop your ports, you better make sure that it can accommodate the green initiative here to handle multiple types of fuels as we go down the low carbon efficiency route, because, and so keep in mind, you got to be able to handle, which 99% of the vessels out there are running on, fossil fuels. Oh, but then you also have to have not only fuel systems for that, but for charging for batteries or gas or natural gas or whatever, hydrogen or whatever the case the things are running on. That's just going to drive up your costs. So then they turn around and say, okay, now we need to get with the banking and financial industry to help finance these efforts in these small islands to do it. Well, the private sector will take care of that if it is a viable endeavor. But instead, you can't. It's like making a loan to somebody that is, will they be able to repay it? I don't care if it's an individual or a company or a country. So I just see that there's a lot of effort here. The agenda is good and all that. In practicality, I don't know. There is one thing that came out of the article. Well, two things, I guess. And we mentioned this. You were talking about the blockchain initiative. That was tied into the single window initiative. The single entry kind of thing. Single window means submitting an entry to, let's say, customs that goes to the multiple agencies involved for clearing the freight and then comes back through that one window. It gives the brokers and companies one, if you will, one transmission, one data file to manage to, and you send the information to. In this, that single window sounds great, provided that if you want to, and they were trying to promote this with a lot of countries, in developing a single window for that country, if they're going to do that, it makes it easier on the community, provided, though, that all of the other supporting government agencies don't come out with a Christmas list of all the data sets that they're looking for. It's like, oh, well, we need this and this and this and this and this and all these additional data sets or data elements. Does that really have to be done on the front end for the release of the goods, which impacts the cycle times of the port and could contribute to port congestion, versus getting the information on the back end when you file a confirmation of an entry? So that's one thing that, the blockchain will help secure some of the data as far as what's being presented, gives you an audit trail. The single window is great if all agencies and buys into it, and that country has good leadership to envision to say, let's make sure we are putting forth the essential data elements for the single window and go from there. And in the private sector, you need to get your trade associations involved. If they're going to go a single window, that you make your voice heard to say what should and should not happen. But then the second element is the UN is looking at putting forth as they call it, a UN trade and development, trade and transport data set. In other words, putting forth a standardized data set of information for transactions. That in concept is fantastic. I will say, the link that they give, I've clicked on it. I've been trying to get down to what is that actual data set. And it is convoluted. I feel like I'm in a maze. So far, I have not been able to get to the actual file. So I'm looking at that. Hopefully we can come back and we get some more of this, Lalo, and maybe we can come back and look at it and talk about this a little bit more, Andy. Overall, I think there's a couple of good things in this deal, but it's pretty much a bunch of folks with like big bags of hot air getting together and say, hey, we're talking. I don't know if anything will come of it.
All right. Good talk. Good talk. Yeah, you can find this video on, again, the newsletter that we brought out on Friday. So look at the video. You can get back to us, share with us your thoughts, your opinions. We value all kinds of opinions. And if you want to jump on the podcast and share your opinion out loud, you can do that too. Let us know. All right. Well, these are our 3 articles that we have today. I feel like they were pretty good. Not too much about China for once, and more about what is happening, in the whole of global trade. So again, we have a fun fact for you, just like always. And for once, I found a really good one that I thought it was super interesting. Barcodes the barcodes that we see in supermarkets, if we want to buy a shirt, if we're going shopping, but we all do too much, we find them on, when they scan it. So barcodes were first used to label train cars on the railroad. Didn't know this. Did you know this, guys? No? Okay. Well, barcodes were originally used to label cars on the railroads. Due to their success, they were expanded for use in supermarkets in 1974 and have been used across retail, logistics, and many other industries since. How cool. Yeah. I thought that was a cool
I could tell
fact.
you that I was part of the group back in the 80s that were testing out the use of barcodes and tracking and tracing when we were developing the systems at FedEx. That back in that day, that was pretty innovative. And
look at us now with all these barcodes everywhere.
Oh man, you got barcodes, you got QR codes, you've got all kinds of stuff. RFI type deals. Yeah, we have.
I feel like that's a good ending for today. We'll be back next week. Hope for you to join us again. Follow us, as it really helps us, continue this podcast, and let us know what you think. So, all right. Bye, guys.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.